All attendees are mute, but we invite you to type any questions into Q&A box. We will leave time for Q&A at the end of this session. My name is Tim Zhang. Currently, I'm living in Amsterdam. I'm an NYU Steinhardt alum, graduate with a master's degree in higher education and student affairs. As an international student and employee, I lived, studied, and worked in the US for past 10 years, from Alabama to Minnesota and finally to New York City. My passion is to explore new culture and adapt to new environment. I went on several research trips related to culture and education. In China, Ecuador, Germany, Greece, and India, my experience taught me to always reimagine the possible. So I decided to move to the Netherlands last August. Now I'm starting my own startups company overseas in Amsterdam, focused on global mobility, helping highly educated master level grads relocate to Netherlands through Dutch orientation year resident permit and providing a first month orientation program to help them quickly adapt to local system, Dutch culture, complying with local regulations and building communities. I'm very excited about today's session. This session will last around an hour with 30 minutes presentation presented by our guest speaker, 15 minutes panel conversation, and 15 minutes for audience Q&A. I will turn the time to my former colleague and classmate, Edwin.
Thanks, Tim. Hi, everyone. My name is Edwin Ragas. I am also a proud NYU Steinhardt alum with a master's in higher education and student affairs. Currently, I'm an associate director at the Wasserman Center for Career Development, specifically at the NYU School of Professional Studies. Prior to working in higher ed, my background was in marketing and finance. I'm very excited to be part of today's session as someone who works closely with many international students at NYU, as well as someone whose life has been significantly shaped by migration. My parents actually migrated from the Philippines in the late 1980s to the Sultanate of Oman in the Middle East, where I lived as a child, as well as in the Philippines before we immigrated to the US when I was 10 years old. So I'm looking forward to today's session and all the great conversation. And so Tim, I think we're gonna start with a few polls before we get into it.
Yeah, thanks, Edwin. So before we introduce our guest speakers, we also want to know who are our audience today. And we have some questions here. So we have a first question, will pop up through your screen. So where are you living? Where do you live right now? If you do not see this pop-up question, so it might be because you don't have the newest version of the Zoom. So we will give another 20 seconds for everyone to vote for it. All right, so let's see the result. So from this result chart, we see majority of the audience today is 83% is in North America and 10% based in Europe. So I will turn next question to Edwin.
Yep, so the next question you'll see on your screen, since we're talking about moving, when are you planning to move? If this is something that's relevant to your situation. Okay, so quite a range of answers here. Most of the folks in the room, just under half of the folks in the room are not moving yet, but just thinking about it. And then the next group, about 22% of you are saying 1 to 6 months from now. And then right after that is 15%, 6 months to a year from now, and then it pretty much levels off from there. And then our last question, Tim.
Yeah, so last question, where are you moving? Okay, so we see this result as 61% of people are planning to move into a new country, and with 39% of our audience is moving within their own countries. So we see we have very diverse audience today. Very exciting to see you all here.
Great. Thanks everyone for sharing those answers so we know who's in the room. So today's program features the co-author of the book, The Mobile Life, A New Approach to Moving Anywhere, Anne Parker. Anne was born to British parents in New Zealand and has lived in Hong Kong, Bahrain, Jamaica, Nigeria, the UK, and Australia. So a lot of world traveling there. Now based in Amsterdam, Anne is a qualified learning professional. She's used her wealth of experience to develop training programs for international companies on capabilities such as cultural adaptation, intercultural communication, and change management. Currently, she focuses on leadership development and is responsible for designing and delivering global learning initiatives that produce behavioral change and business impact. In 2011, she developed a unique program that took a corporate skills approach using project management, change management, and leadership skills. This training program was the basis for many of the concepts in her book. So Anne, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Edwin. It's really weird to sit there and hear that all read out about you. So thank you so much. It's very nice to be with you all and to spend the next hour with you. Just to go over a little bit of that. I mean, basically for me, I've traveled a lot in my life and I wanted to have a look at how we can be consciously in control of managing change. And so everything I've done around the training, around the book that I've co-authored with Deanne, who is on the call with us today, so that's very lovely, is really to help people consciously be in control of an international relocation to support their career. So here is my plan. I'm going to share my screen with you now, and let's start there. Here we go. So the plan for today is really to help you. For some of you, you have just moved, and for others of you, you're thinking about moving quite soon. For the rest of you, maybe in the next 6 months to a year. And I think what we can do is look today about how you master that challenge of moving somewhere new and how you can be consciously in control of it. So you don't have to worry about the relocation as you look to also start your international career. So as Tim said, it's about 30 minutes that I'm going to talk to you for, but then after that, we're going to do a Q&A. And at the end of it, I really want it that you're clearer about what you can do before and during a move to make sure that it is successful for you and that you have a really great life on the other side of it. So I'm going to deal with 3 different areas today. Let's have a look at what's the big deal about relocation and moving, and what approach can we take to it, and what strategies can we apply. So I just want to say that I'm really aware that we're having this conversation at the same time as we're going through one of the biggest experiences any of us will go through with a pandemic and the coronavirus. And I'm aware that a lot of what I'm talking about here is about dealing with big change that, you know, and areas of a life being impacted. And I'm aware that there's a lot of these approaches and strategies that you can apply to that. What I'd rather do is leave you to pull that towards your own experiences right now of big, unexpected change coming into our lives. And I'll really take this approach from the relocation perspective. But I know and I can imagine that you're pulling them both to relocation and your own experience personally right now. So what's the big deal? Well, let's have a look at the expat experience. And the first place I start for that is, of course, Einstein. Very clever man. And he had a very clever formula, E equals mc squared. And so when people ask me about what's the big deal about moving and why is it sometimes so challenging, I say, remember the formula. And the formula means for me, expat equals managing change squared. So you are managing change on every single area of your life. You're not going on holiday. It's not for a short period of time. You're actually going to manage this change and you know there's no going back. And so on the one hand, I think, yes, it's important for us to be able to summarize that into something really to remember that we're normal when we go through the expat experience, and it is a large experience and therefore a large formula. Next thing, let's have a look at the way we're impacted. So I'm sure that a lot of you have seen Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So Maslow, in the second half of the 20th century, he researched people who were successful. And what he wanted to know is, where are they spending their energy, their focus, their time? And what he realized is that we have a certain order of needs that we need met in our lives. And once we have that need met, we will unconsciously start trying to get the next need met. Now, I think this is a really important slide for you, because when we find models that help us to explain the experience we're going through, we know we're normal, but also we can know how far we've come and we know where we're going next. The thing with Maslow's model, which was 5 different levels of need, he said, well, we all need the basic biological and physiological needs. We need food, shelter, warmth. But once we have that, when we've relocated, we're going to start looking at, what are the rules here? Am I safe here? Is this a good environment to live in? What are the rules culturally? How do I create a sense of order in my life, a rhythm, a routine? After that, he said, people naturally start looking at, how can I find a sense of community, a sense of tribe, of belonging, of love? And people obviously look to their family, but they look to their work and their colleagues to find affection and to feel belonging and to be known. So those, to Maslow, were these really key essential needs. And what he said with the top 2 needs were really growth needs, where next we look for esteem and self-esteem. We want to be proud of ourselves, and achievements, so that we know that we're being challenged and we're delivering and we're stretching ourselves and we're growing. And the final level of need is self-actualization, which is really about fulfillment, that you as a human being feel that you are living your purpose. Now, the irony when I saw this model was that many of us will relocate internationally or across our own country for career. And all of us are really relocating for the top levels of Maslow's need, for growth, for achievement, for purpose. But what can happen when we relocate is we end up at the bottom levels of need, rebuilding all those levels again. And it's not often that we have to do this, and it takes a lot of energy and time. So I find this model really helpful to say, as long as you know, then you know what you're aiming for, and you know these levels that you have to rebuild and create for yourselves. So that is the way we're impacted. The areas of our lives that are impacted, well, they're all of them, aren't they, when we move? There are daily habits and our routines, there are relationships and the way we connect with people. Our professional environment may change, our hobbies, pastimes, and our financial situation. So as well as dealing with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, every area of our life is changing. And so to summarize, and it's not bad news, it's just big news, that as long as we know that this is what is coming, we can definitely deal with it. And the way that Deanne and I like to summarize this is that really think of 3 maps that you have that build your life. And you have to rebuild them when you move. So the first one is your physical map, and we really get that. We see that on this mobile. We know that when we move, we're going to have to understand where things are in relation to each other, how we get there, navigate ourselves through our new physical environment. But the second thing that we have to do is we have to rebuild our activity map. And this is an important map because this is where we start enjoying life, when we go and do yoga, when we go to the cinema, when we have time to meet people, when we do our sports activities. So the activity map is something that you have to rebuild as well. And then finally, the third map is also a really important map. It's, in a way, your identity map. Because when you move, you become the new person. And we know that it takes seconds for people to take an impression of us. And it can take a while for them to change it. But certainly your identity map is made up of 2 things. First one is how you see yourself to be. And the second one is how other people are reflecting to you, they see you. And I've met people in different countries around the world who have been the partner of someone. And what can happen for them is they begin to introduce themselves as, oh, I'm the partner of this person who works at this company. And what I say, and what we say in the book is, you really have to look after your identity map and make sure that that is really protected. So 3 maps have to be rebuilt. And what is the big deal about moving? It's E equals MC squared. It's managing change on every area of your life. So at this point, you're probably saying, well, that's a big deal then. Yes, you persuaded me there. What can I do about it? So here it's really about the approach that you can take. And this is where the book comes in that what we wanted to do was really create a different type of book on relocation. We didn't want to talk about individuals' experiences. We wanted to take a business management approach where we could look at skills that you can use and where there's a huge body of work and knowledge and apply them to the relocation experience. So we take a business management approach. We look at project management skills and tools. We look at change management skills and tools and self-leadership. And all of these bodies of work that actually in companies we train, and I spend time training in companies these different skills. But when you relocate, you're really living them 24/7. You have to make a plan to project manage yourself across the country or to a new country. And there are lots of change management skills that you will learn as you do it to visualize the life that you want and to manage the surprises that come up. And there's lots of self-leadership skills that you develop and use as you move. You motivate yourself. You set yourself goals that are realistic and time-bound. So we take a real business management approach to this so that you can take active skills and be in control of the process. The second step in this approach that we would suggest for you is to create an empowering context. So let me introduce you to Sir Ernest Shackleton, more about him in a minute, but he was an international explorer. And we would suggest that you are the modern day explorers. And this is a context that will find you both the challenges and the rewards. You're not going on an extended holiday when you relocate for your career. You are actually going 24/7 and you're doing it for a big adventure and for growth in your career and in your life. And so when you look at something like I am the modern day explorer and I'm going on expedition and relocating to another part of the country or overseas, you know you're up for a big story and a big challenge and big rewards. So Sir Ernest Shackleton is an interesting person, and in the book we open every chapter with his story. Now he is British, but we didn't choose him for that. We chose him because he had an amazing adventure and basically everything went wrong, but he was an incredible leader of himself and of his team. And from that, we can find all these great examples of how you go to a new location and rebuild successfully. So the second thing that I want to talk about with this approach is to be realistic. So I'm going to show you the advert that Shackleton placed in a British newspaper in 1914 to get recruits to go on the expedition. And at that point in time, going to Antarctica was like going to the moon. It was like the most adventurous, extreme, furthest place on the planet that you could go. Look at this advert. Men wanted for hazardous journey, small wages, bitter cold, long months of complete darkness and constant danger. Safe return is doubtful. However, honor and recognition in case of success. So right at the very beginning, Shackleton was crystal clear with people that this is going to be tough. Do not apply unless you understand the realities of what we're going to experience. And he was really interested in who he hired, because he really looked for people who, first of all, had that experience, but secondly, really understood what they were going to experience. So, third thing to consider in an approach is be ready for the unexpected. And what I'm going to show you now is what happened on the expedition. So in the top right-hand corner, you can see in yellow this, well, actually, let's look at Antarctica. The red right across Antarctica is the intended route to cross the entire continent. But the top right-hand corner in yellow is what actually happened. So right in the corner, you can start with a little island, and that's where they set off from. And you can see that they almost touched Antarctica. They were so close. The men on the ship, the Endurance, was so close to the continent itself, but what happened was an unexpected snap cold overnight. And the men woke up in the morning to find the ship completely packed in ice. And they tried to get out and it looked really close, but in the end, they floated for 9 months in packed ice. And really, Shackleton came to the forefront now as a leader. He was amazing at being able to look at the situation and go, what do I do now? Where do I find my opportunities and how do I respond? So really, when we relocate and we are our own modern day explorers, we have to be ready for the fact that the unexpected is going to happen. So it's not a holiday, it is an adventure. We will have challenges and we will have rewards, and you can prepare for it. So at this point, you're probably asking, great, I get it, but what can I actually do? So let's have a look at some strategies that we can apply before and during a relocation. And the first strategy is fill in those life maps. Because for a lot of us, when we move, we spend time finding the house, moving in the house, getting the furniture, understanding our physical map. But what we don't tend to do, because we're tired and we're busy relocating, is build that activity map. And so the more that you can make yourself busy, the less that you feel like you're waiting for your life to start. And the more activity you do, the more you get chance to fill in your identity map by meeting people through sports, by meeting people through hobby, by being active. And so, you know, Deanne and I would suggest that the first thing you need to do, and have it in the back of your mind at all times, is fill in your maps. And so for those of you who are thinking about moving, a really great exercise for the next few months for you is to start just writing down or thinking in your head about what do I spend my time doing and how does that help me with my identity map. So for example, for me, when I lived in Australia, I used to, you know, meet my girlfriends and go out for a drink quite regularly. And I would have thought of that as fun, and I did think of that as fun. But when I relocated, I realized that that was a very important activity for me, to meet up with a group of my friends who got me, who understood me, who got my humor, and that I could relate to them and they could relate to me. And they also understood my qualifications and what they meant and the companies I'd worked for and how relevant that was. So I was known as me. So just go around your life noticing your activity map and your identity map and how important they are and what activities protect your identity map and allow you to be you. The second strategy is check your assumptions. So what I'm showing you here is the Endurance, which in the end came to a really terrible end. Hull got cracked by the ice. One particular night there was huge pressure and a massive crack went through the ship, and very slowly it began to sink. I mean, it took a day or two and they were really ready for this, the crew. But why I show this picture when I say check your assumptions about how life will be in your new location is this ship could have been built, and it was custom built for this expedition. It could have been built with a pointed hull. All the whaling ships were. because if they got stuck in the ice, it meant they just popped out the side and leaned over until the ice melted. But it was unexpected, this early cold snap. And so the boat was actually built flat bottomed, and that meant that it cracked. When we go on expedition and we relocate, we have some really unconscious assumptions about how life will be. And those can really trip us up. And we can get really sad and disappointed by what we find, because we may not have researched it, or we may just be surprised. But if you check your assumptions and you research beforehand, you should hopefully avoid this situation. And then the next one is really to connect and get support. So what I'm showing you here is the crew. And the crew at this point in time have got off the ice floe, and they've managed in 3 small boats to get to a little tiny island. It's a rock island in the middle of nowhere. And what you can see behind them, the little chimney, is actually one of their lifeboats turned upside down. It's incapable of being used as a lifeboat anymore. So they've decided to create a hut from it, and it's been turned upside down with a chimney put in it and tarpaulin put over it. Now, when I use this example of connect and get support, Shackleton realized very early on that he was going to have to create a team out of these people that would support each other in a way they'd not really expected to do before. And on the ship, there were 3, if you like, classes or hierarchy of men. There were the officers who were running the ship, there were the scientists who came along for research reasons, and there was the ship's crew. And there was really not only a differentiation in the way they treated each other and the physical boundaries between them, but they actually put walls between their living conditions. So Shackleton broke down all the walls, and he created teams of men who would do football games against each other. They raced the huskies so that they would bond together and be able to tell each other when they needed help and support. And you know, the book really looks at giving you language for what you are experiencing, the skills you're using or the skills you need and the tools you need, so that you can talk to other people about that in a language that's much more practical and less emotional. But really you need your team, and they can be your team from back home, but you also need as soon as possible to start creating connections with people so that they can support you through this process. And then finally, this is, you know, something you've already heard from me, but the final skill is, in summary, use business management skills like analyze your overall situation, check your assumptions after you've moved, but also before you move, and monitor your reactions, because under stress and when we're tired and when we're actually adapting our bodies as well as our minds to a new location, we might react differently than normal, and that's okay. We should just be aware of it and aware we might need some sleep or some rest or some support from home. Also, strategize. Do research about where you're going. Choose the place you're going to, not just move away from the place you're in. Be creative with your solutions, and certainly Shackleton had to be all the time. And ensure realism in what you're expecting. And many times we talk to people and hear that they're expecting to have rebuilt their life within 6 months to a year, but we didn't build the lives we've got now in 6 months to a year. So if you give yourself a bit more time, you take the pressure off and you allow yourself to be in the process step by step. Thirdly, plan. And you can do this by writing it down, but I don't tend to write things down. I tend to have them in my head, but I do create goals. I'm clear about what I want to do and what I want to achieve. And we all create goals. We don't achieve things without them. But set milestones to achieving those goals. You know, there might be certain steps you need to take before you get to that goal. And it's important to have your milestones, because then you know you've achieved them and you can, you know, reward yourself. And map your actions, because sometimes things can seem really big, but you can break them down into small actions that build towards the life you want and the goals you want to achieve. And finally, self-manage. Manage your expectations. Sometimes we expect more and we have assumed things that aren't realistic for at least the first few months or maybe for that location. For instance, in Amsterdam, you know, people coming here expecting to have big houses in the middle of Amsterdam is just not realistic. And so managing those expectations will really help you avoid disappointments. Motivate yourself. Now, that's not easy to do, but people do it a lot when they relocate. And I say it because well done you. And in interviews, when you are in interviews with companies and you have relocated, you can really talk about an example of how you've had to motivate yourself, self-lead, which is when you relocate and there's challenges ahead and you keep going. And finally, be flexible. You will have to be flexible. You will learn to be flexible. Get ready to be flexible, because that's another brilliant skill that companies are looking for. Just to put this entire slide in another way, Deanne and I both present at international job fairs. And what we do is we talk about the fact that people who have relocated have unconsciously developed all these skills. And they are great examples to talk about in interviews, because companies are looking first for craft and second for experience. And the experience can come from your personal life and having to rebuild your life in a new country. And that's a really amazing 24/7 experience of managing change that many people don't have. But when you move, you then have it. So bring that into your corporate life. So you can really be in control of the adaptation experience, and you really can manage it and prepare for it. So we really want to have a look at what's the big deal, what's the approach that you can take, and what strategies can you apply. And so finally, I just wanted to show you, in case you're saying, hey, where do we get this book from? Well, I Googled it today on Amazon, and it is the first book that comes up. And there you can see Deanne there with me as co-author of the book. And you can see we have lovely reviews and a good score. So if you are looking for it, please feel free to find it there. And really, in conclusion, you know, the mobile life when you relocate is an absolute adventure, an adventure worth doing. It has its challenges, but it has its rewards, and you grow in your career and you grow in your skills. And with the right approach, with the right tools and strategies, you really can master the challenge of moving somewhere new and of moving anywhere new. Thank you.
Thank you, Annie. Such a wonderful presentation. And I think you definitely, particularly I'm thinking about life map. It's really helpful whenever I move. I would think if I know it earlier, it could make my move much more smoothly. So, and also I think we had one question our audience was asking about. We are the second edition for the book. I think it was just published recently, right? So it's probably not really in the US market yet.
So we have a second edition coming out with some revised changes, and it is because of coronavirus. I'm sure you can understand that has slowed down. So what you can find right now is a hard copy, and a soft copy is the old edition, and that is out now, and that is totally up to date. So new edition coming soon, and with a couple of extra focus areas and more. Actually, one of the biggest chapters that we've revised, and Deanne did a lot of this work, is how to support families with kids when they move.
Thank you. So we are going through our next session, which is the panel question. So me and Edwin both have some questions we want to ask. So this is just a reminder for our audience. If you do have any questions, please use Q&A box. So we will have 15 minutes at the end of this session to answer your question there. So before we jump in the panel question, we also have another pop-up question to know a little bit more about who are you and what's your experience moving in your life? So how many times have you moved in your life? So this question should pop up soon.
Great. So you happy for me to answer it now, Tim?
Yeah, I think this question is for the audience. Here we go. Yeah.
Ah, it's a poll. Got it.
It's a poll, yeah. And also both domestically and internationally, just to be a little bit more clarified here. So let's see the answer. So we have the top one is 36% people voted 1 to 3 times in your life, followed by 4 to 6 times, which is 33% of audience here. We do see there's 18% of audience here today in our like session is more than 10 times, which is super impressed. So that just also kind of come up with my first question here. As you mentioned before, a lot of people move by the job or by their careers. So what would you say to the individual who has arrived but hasn't secured an opportunity yet? For example, moving because of partner's job, or they move to a new country, like in the Netherlands, they are on the search year resident permit.
Yeah, that can be a really difficult time, because what's happening here, if you think about the 3 maps, there's 2 things going on here. One is, of course, you've got to fill in all 3 maps. And if you are the one at home, you're probably the one filling in most of the physical map. And hopefully you're starting to rebuild your activity map. What people tell me when they are looking for work and they have relocated, they've got a double whammy on their identity map. So whereas you were working before, now you're not. And it might well be that you're alone and not working, and that's a really lonely, challenging experience. Or it might be that your partner is working and you're not. And then there's a disconnect between you saying, some of my identity has got thinner or smaller because I can't contribute in the way that I used to. And my partner doesn't really experience that. So it's hard for me to express it. So things I would say about that is be realistic in your timeframes to get work, and be planned about it. So some people can really feel like overwhelmed by the amount of rejections. And to be honest, we can all feel that, whether we've moved or not, and we're looking for a new job. It's a trying time. So I think it's about understanding that you're up for getting a new job. You understand that there's a challenge of a new environment, and you research well, but you say to yourself, I'm going to just apply and I'm going to just keep going. And here's my plan. And the emotions that I feel, especially around my identity, who am I? I'll never get a job here. I don't speak the language. They don't recognize my qualifications. All of that might be the case, but I know many, many, many people who have managed still to rebuild their careers in other countries. You have to keep going. So I think be realistic and be determined.
Great, thanks for that. And I really appreciate the part of your presentation where you really laid out clearly, analyze, strategize, plan, and self-manage. For my role in career development, I think that that's a really great way for folks to approach a job search as well, right? They're going to, many of the people here are probably going to apply these steps for a move, but then also be able to apply these steps for when there's trying to secure a job. And I really like how you mentioned that the fact that you've applied these for a move, these are the transferable skills that you can highlight in an interview. And so it's really great to hear that. My question, related to that is, what are the most common reasons why people decide to move if it's not out of necessity? And I ask this question from a place of, again, related to jobs, when people ask like, well, how do I know when it's time to move to a new job? And in this context, what are the reasons why people decide to do a big move?
Yeah, I mean, they're varied reasons, of course, and in a way, I don't have the data on that, but I know what you're getting at. And I think there's 2 things to consider here. And let's put it into the question of when do I know it's time, which is such an important question. And, you know, I would say it's looking at two things. One is, what is pushing you away from the situation now? What are you saying is, you know, is it time to move out of this job? Is it time to grow? Is it this environment? Is it this location? So you want to move away, fine, but what is pulling you towards that job and that country and that location? Because you're going to be there 24/7. So I think understanding that you find there's enough balance between I want to move and now is the right time, and I choose this place and this career and this environment because it's 24/7, and you can get yourself really busy at work, but there are nights and weekends, you know, and holidays. So it's really about understanding that balance, I would suggest.
Thanks, Annie. So we have other question. So it's more about how do you build a community when you move to a new country or new region? So you previously talking about when you move to Australia, you building a community through finding your girlfriend or just go grab a drink. So do you have any advice on that part?
Yeah, really good question. So I think this, I mean, so you have your activity map, you want to build a community. It's really important for Maslow's hierarchy of needs, love and belonging. How do you do it? Well, I think one of the things I would say to you is take into account culture. And so if we talk about one of the big aspects of culture that will probably be the first ones you experience really is communication styles. So as you're wanting to connect and find yourself in a community, you might find that there are different rules and habits about how people introduce themselves. For instance, in Amsterdam, if you move into a new location, your neighbors will expect you to go to them and say hello to them. And they won't come because they're waiting for you. And it really doesn't matter if you realize 6 months later, a year later, and go and say hi. But they are waiting for that. And in other environments, like North America, you would come and welcome the new person. So note that, and note that if you're not aware, you might be missing opportunities to connect. But the second thing is communication style. And so it may well be that we come from a communication style where we infer what we want and what we need and what we think. And we hope other people will pull it out of our conversation and our inference. But it means that if we have someone on the other side who really says what they think and is listening for that, there might be a disconnect in the way that you find, you know, that you really understand each other and find out who that lovely person is. So I think it's important to know that there might be expectations about how you make friends. Another one, and I say this just because I live here and I've lived here for a long time, you know, generally speaking in the Netherlands, people compartmentalize their relationships. So they can have a 30, 40 year connection with people they've been to university with. How lovely is that? And they can also have the same with people they do sports with, but they will not mix. So it's about understanding your expectation. Do I expect the people I work with to become my friends? In some countries, yes. In other countries, no. And so I think researching that and then using and flexing your communication style to be able to really meet other people.
Great, thanks for that. My question that I have next is around resilience, and you know, obviously this process is going to pose a lot of challenges, and it's really in the resilience there, you know, where people really stick it out. And I was looking through some of the questions that were coming in through the Q&A and trying to weave some of them in as well. So there are questions that are coming in from the Q&A around challenges that might impact folks who, you know, maybe are over 50, so they're doing this move a little bit later in their adult life. And then another one is moving as an adult to a region where you don't speak the language. So I want to pose those two as specific scenarios, challenges that come up around that, and how to stay resilient around those situations.
Great questions, good points. So one research has shown that one of the #1 reasons that we go into culture shock is because we're surrounded by another language that we do not understand over time. Now, first to say, Deanne and I do not like the phrase culture shock. We don't like to think of ourselves in shock, but people know that term, and it's really about cultural adaptation. And so when we start to feel disconnected from our environment, and if you think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and we don't know if we're safe, we don't know what people are saying, we feel a bit embarrassed. I mean, these things can have us 24/7 feeling a bit disconnected. Now, I know people around me who have been superb at learning languages quickly, and it's not my skill. I learn languages very slowly, but I seem to be getting there. But at least I'm trying, and it finds the connection for me with people. I know other people who said, you know what, we can all speak in English, but you get my personality. And so let's stay here and let's create the connections. But I think that, you know, learning a language is such a rich experience. It just may take some time, and be realistic about that. But I know that your local environment would absolutely appreciate and love that you are doing that. That said, you can find pockets of internationals anywhere in the world who are working in that environment and are busy working in that environment and don't have time to learn the language. And you might find that that's where you fit for a while. And do you know, as a strategy, that's a great strategy, because we're trying to get you to rebuild those maps and really look after your identity map. You get to be you in this new environment. Now, talking about being over 50, I completely relate. And I really understand that in a way, what can be impacting there, first of all, just tiredness and the energy it takes to relocate. That's a lot. But secondly, it's about identity. And sometimes we can go, we feel that we might be seen as not, you know, the young adventurer. Well, I think it's about understanding for yourself, what do you want? How do you want to do it? And being crystal clear about, this is my goal. This is the kind, you know, this is the kind of life I want to have. This is the vision. And therefore, you know, if I have quite a quiet life now, and if I relocated, I would want a quiet life there. So it's having the goal that fits you and protecting your identity by introducing yourself with your kind of, your rounded who you are. So to give you an example of that, I've met a lot of people who said, oh, I'm new, I'm the partner of, I'm this or that. But when I really dig down, I found out they're entrepreneurs, that they've set up charities, that they've done interesting education. And sometimes when you are the new person, others don't give you that chance. So you need to be the one to get to be able to tell these stories and open up to others. Final thing to say that might be interesting for you are, you know, in terms of resilience, Shackleton had a strategy. Nobody was allowed to say, what if we never get back? He refused to have that conversation. He was positive, forward-looking, he had a plan, and his language reflected that positivity and that determination to make it work. So in terms of resilience, you know, you can certainly say, I am on a journey of learning this language. I can't speak it yet, but I'm on the journey, so I'm in the game. And, you know, I'm an experienced person of the world who's going on another adventure to meet more new people and to see what comes from that. So our language is really important for resilience.
Thank you, Annie. So right now we run out of time, so we're gonna jump into a Q&A specific target with our audience questions. So the first question we have here is, can you give your own experience of moving, and why did you move, and did you move for work or just for the pleasure?
My goodness me. So I was born in New Zealand, so I moved, I was moved by my mum in her belly. So I started there, and after that I started moving around the world, and we had 2-year assignments because my father worked for a telecommunication company, and that was the kind of the contract length. So I spent up until the age of 10 moving every 2 years to different countries. From the age of 10, I settled in to the UK. I'm sure you've noticed that about my accent. But having said that, I haven't lived there for at least 30 years now. So I then moved to Australia to backpack and stayed there for a long time. Met a Dutch guy, and therefore I live in Amsterdam now. Careful who you meet whilst you're traveling. And I've been here and I'm working in an international online travel agency and also doing coaching and bringing my relocation experience, you know, into different aspects of my life. The reason why I ended up in this particular career, because I was a product manager and a project manager in the beginning, was when I first came to Amsterdam, I was working for another tech company, and we were really trying to find people to move to our company. And back then we were realizing that it was really hard to help them and support them on the weekends and in the evenings to stay. And so that had me thinking, you know, how do we do that? And I don't know why, I think it was a little bit of madness, but I decided to stop my job and start a training company to really see how could I do this, bringing corporate skills, because I could really see those skills were the skills that we could look to and would help a behavior change and a mindset change. Thank you for that question. Hopefully that's enough.
For sure. Another question that came up, you mentioned you'll cover this, I think, in the newer edition, but if you could expand on this a little bit more today, some of your top advice for partners and couples with kids to handle the move and manage the change and new life better, especially when one of the partners is studying or working.
Well, you know, the book really has everything in it, the one that we have now. It's just Deanne has expanded the bit around families and kids in the new edition. There's a couple of extra sections there, but absolutely. So let's fill them separately. So when we look at partners, I think we have to really be aware that they will go through much more of this experience of change, probably and generally, than the one who's working, because the one who's working is at the top of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, having these top needs fulfilled. They have gone for their career, for their growth, to be their purpose and the best they can be. And they're in a structure. They're probably very tired and they're very, very busy, but they're in a structure. And so on the weekends, they're trying to find time. But the partner has all the time in the world, and that might not be normal for them. And they are, on the one hand, trying to rebuild the life for both of them and set up the things that need to be set up because they're at home. And on the other hand, really trying to rebuild an identity map that says, I am still the unique, equal individual in this relationship and in life. And yes, at the moment I'm at home and I'm not earning the money, but they are. And so all these things can really impact the identity of a partner who is then also probably trying to apply for jobs, and the first jobs they won't get. So, you know, the book really gives them a language to articulate to their partner what's going on. And I know that some partners have said to me, I just gave them the book and said, read it. And so, you know, to really explain that this is a big deal, and I'm at the lower levels of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and I'm really struggling with my identity map. So it is a big deal, and I think to be able to understand that, and for the one who is working, sometimes I say to them, give your partner time and appreciation. You might be tired on the weekend, but you do have to get up and you do have to go out because they've been waiting for you. And, you know, don't expect within 6 months them to be chirpy and happy and on with it. It might take longer. You have the job. So, you know, it's about having that understanding of different experiences. With children, I think it's also really important to remember, and the first 3 chapters of the book are really about planning to leave, and about how, you know, for a lot of you who are watching, you're thinking about leaving. Well, we found that a huge part of the book about what allows you to go, what helps you decide to go, and what's the vision you can create, and how do you have a good goodbye, and what steps can you take. All of these things are just as important for children. They need to be able to say goodbye. They need to have connections. They need to know they're coming back. They need a connection into the new school. And many schools will allow children to start connecting with classmates in the new school and seeing videos and getting excited and being realistic in their expectations of how that move will go. I feel like I could go on and on, so I've decided to stop.
Good. I feel the topic is like, you can go a lot. It's different kind of perspective you can share, and everyone's individual experience also will be so different. So I think right now we almost run out of time. So I think both me and Edwin gonna ask one more question before we end the session. So I try to combine a few questions here. So one of the audience was asking about how do you balance between create a social bubble that make you feel comfortable and safe in a new location. The specifics asking about the language difference. For example, when you move to a third language country, you speak English only with English people, but how do you connect with local people to experience the culture the most? The other attendee also asking about they have been using a meetup app to meet new people based on the Hobbit. So they want to ask a little more advice on what other website or app they can meet with the locals.
Okay, so the first one is about how do you, there's a bit of a debate, I think, between should you create and stay in an expat bubble, or open that up and live with the locals. And I think what I would say, I've been slow with my language learning, I have to say that, but I'm not slow at meeting people and meeting the locals. So for me, it's about really wanting to connect with different people, and whatever language we use and they're willing to use with me, I'll take. I really think it's about knowing the life you want, being really clear about the vision of that life. And if it is to be with your own nationality, or to just make a small bubble for you for the next 6 months to rebuild your life and your energy levels, well, go for that. In terms of apps, I mean, honestly, I'm not the best in terms of techie. I feel like I'm talking to a lot of people here who would understand more where you would go. But what I would say is that if you are moving to a new place, you will find online resources about the place, about communities, about networks, about every single type of community you would want, whether it's your own nationality or whether it's your hobby. And you can find through that connections, and I would look there.
I think that's a great answer. I think even I want to add a little bit more in terms of this question. When I just moved to Netherlands, I do not speak Dutch, which is super challenging for me to really connect with local people. And I think previously we have one audience was asking a question about when you move to a country, they don't speak the language. So that's also when I decided to move to Netherlands. I did a lot of research in terms of do people speak English here? So English proficiency is actually pretty high here in the Netherlands. So I think that's definitely one of the reasons why I picked to move to the Netherlands. I think right now we are running out of time. We know we still have some more questions here in our chat box. So we are unable to answer everything, but we hope at least you get some informal information from us. So that's it for the program for today. So Annie, thank you so much for giving your time and your perspective. It is a pleasure being able to hear from you. We will send a post-event survey. Would love to appreciate if you can fill out after this webinar. And thank you, Casey, from the Office for Global Alumni Relations to help set up this webinar.
And we'd like to remind everyone about Anne's and her co-author Diane's book, The Mobile Life, A New Approach to Moving Anywhere. Please do check it out. To everyone else, thank you for joining today. We hope today's webinar has been informative and insightful. Take care, everyone, and stay safe.
Thank you so much, guys. It's been an absolute pleasure. See you.
Take care.